But yeah, I'm Laura Hausler. And my like Instagram, where you can find me is Pilates and Scoliosis.
Mhm.
And that's how my business kind of started. Like I was a Pilates instructor before that, but decided to start my own thing. So my website is pilatesandscoliosis.com. Um,
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. We all have so many different hats and things that we're passionate about. So for you to really camp out on that, like what made you decide that I'm going to just own this corner of the market?
I realized one that as I was going to trainings, this will jump right into some things. It was very much so at a certain phase in my life with training, there was no difference between how my body moved, technically in some ways, to somebody who didn't have scoliosis. So I was game. I was, former athlete. I'm ready to go. Just put me in, coach.
Yes.
So, going to trainings and realizing that I wasn't necessarily a part of the conversation. If it came up to questions, it was always like, wait till that specialty workshop, or,
Oh, yes.
come back later. Um, and so I started to realize, even as my career continued, that it was almost a taboo topic. Like, you don't bring this up during training.
Yes.
Um,
Because it
I
was too
was,
complex?
I think, I mean, and as somebody who's, also trying to be in that wheelhouse of educating, it's difficult to be like, you have so many ideas, things you're communicating, and if somebody throws you a question that's related but technical and from a little bit of left field, you're kind of going, okay. But if
Yeah.
we
Parking
don't,
lot that will come back.
all right. So if we don't
Yes.
circle back around, I started to notice along with that a little bit of misinformation.
Mhm.
So my heart just, started to develop a passion for that. And then I noticed, there aren't that many people in that niche in
Right.
our industry. There's a couple of people I consider more in the fitness realm with Pilates, for scoliosis, which is awesome. Um, and I guess you could say I started there and then sort of have, by need for my own body, moved into
Yes.
more of a therapeutic zone. Um, so yeah, and I had a little bit of combination of both in my training, because I worked with Jen Gianni from Balanced Body, and
Yes.
she's a powerhouse.
Mm.
you know,
Yeah. But
um,
yeah, I can appreciate that though, with like the complexity. I mean, people have all kinds of different conditions and certain things that you can't really address all of them
yeah,
in a teacher training, right? And
no,
we've had that conversation many times where we have to shift our expectations of even a teacher training and look at it almost like this is your driver's license. Now
yeah,
you're allowed to legally and safely operate a vehicle, but that doesn't mean that you have every skill set to be a pro race car driver.
right. Please don't do that.
Please don't do that, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's like that because I mean otherwise these things do become footnotes and we may or may not circle back to Parkinson's or scoliosis or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like there's so many different things that people can present that we need to be able to be ready for, but there's no way we can cover all of them in a teacher training.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then so my other thing with that is making it affordable. I think one of the other
Ah,
things that I just have a big passion for, and I I see, this will be interesting if we want to talk about as far as with COVID and people teaching from home, which I'm
mhm.
doing. Um, there's this place where it's like we don't want it to, cost us an arm and a leg to continue exploring information with people. Um,
Yes.
So I started to notice that as I was like, oh, can I study with this person or can I study with this person? The pricing, it was just like, not right now.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's something I'm trying to make sure I'm aware of as I'm looking into,
Sure.
expanding what I offer and working with more people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's explore that. And for those of you who are watching, you can put in the comment section, like, what kind of strategies have you used to make Pilates accessible,
I love that. Yeah. When you've said that in your other conversations, I'm like, yes, it needs to be
right?
accessible.
But at the same
Um,
time, in the same breath, it needs to be accessible. But then we also have to not get into this mindset where there's quote unquote no money in Pilates, right? Like, how do we
yeah.
find this balance so that it's a viable career, successful feasible career, but at the same time, make it accessible to as many people as possible, right? So,
Yes.
yeah. So accessible piece. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So, I think being online has actually changed, accessibility immensely, because
Yes.
now you can have, conversation is a big part of how I teach anyway. So figuring out how to use that tool, and making, either recordings of slideshows that I've made, or
Hmm.
meeting with people live and offering those, trying to offer those at a better price, and then
Yes.
still offer what feels like a comprehensive training to me,
Yes.
at a not so crazy price.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but the online thing, so much fun, whether it's meeting with people, one-on-one, getting to connect with people in other countries. And I've seen you do that too. People are tuning into you
Hmm.
from everywhere.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, kind of getting the word out, and then seeing how it spreads from there.
Yes.
Um, in the studio, accessibility is a hard one. I think that is and always has been a challenge for training.
Yes.
Um, and then COVID has kind of, made us all kind of make that quick pivot.
Hmm. Right.
So I'm not sure I have a suggestion about that. What do you think about the in
Yes.
studio accessibility,
Well, yeah, the in-studio accessibility piece, I think it ties back to how are we connected with our community,
Hmm.
right? So now if I have the studio, for example, connecting with schools or like a local community center,
Yeah.
offering one class a week to a larger community
Hmm.
that will point people back to the studio is one of the strategies that I've used in the past. So
That's awesome.
even though it pays less, I also have more eyes on me and there's more people that I can help. And sometimes that'll
Hmm.
turn into like one-on-ones and stuff like that. But even if it doesn't,
Yeah.
there's just this feel good moment for me when I have 60, 70, 80 people in the room for a free community Pilates class once a week
Yeah.
compared
Yeah.
to the one-on-one, right? So, it kind of strokes your ego a little bit to feel like, oh, these are my people, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
it like you're actually making a difference. So I love
That's
those
awesome.
moments, right? So I
Yes.
that's one of the things I choose to lean towards is like where can I get the most eyes on me? Where can I have the most
Yeah.
impact, just numbers wise, and just have that as a component of what I do?
Mm.
Or
Hmm.
have someone on my roster that's not paying anything. At the same time, I have people who are paying full price, right? So
Yeah.
because the people who are paying full price too, like let's be real, they have some expense accounts through their company. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes
They
it's not coming out of their
do.
pocket anyways. So,
Yeah. That's so true.
we can keep the value of what we do up because you're a specialist,
Mm.
right? So you can
I
keep
do.
yeah,
I do that a lot too. Like you're saying, like there's some folks where you're kind of going, yep, we just click. Yes, we're gonna work
yes,
this out. We're gonna find a
we'll
way.
figure it out. Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially when you see people who really have adamancy about connecting with their body,
Hmm.
they're on the same page, they have the same passion you do, and you're going, how do I let you? There's no way. We figure this out. You come here.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and maybe you had people who did that for you. Now that we're
Totally.
talking about it, I did too, and
Hmm.
I never would have gotten started actually without, I'm just gonna a little shout out Sydney Craig at Pilates Tonic. She's on
Okay.
here, but she's on Instagram, but her studio is where I taught, and she was my introduction to Pilates. So
Yes.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
without her and kind of giving me that extra, um, I'll call it a break. It was a break.
Just like a dancer. It's a big break,
Yeah, it
right?
was
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, to be able to train with her, and she has scoliosis as well,
Hmm.
was so cool. And how in tune, I'll never be able to like thank her for how much she gave me, like, to connect to my body.
Yes.
Loved working with her, and just her being like, you want to teach, and I was like,
Hmm.
I do. Yeah. Actually,
Actually, yes. Yes.
I really love this. Don't make me leave the studio.
Right.
I will
Those
wash
are
towels or
amazing.
whatever it takes. She paid
Yes.
she paid me, but I also did purposely like try to hang around. So
How do we create those moments still? Because I mean, that's a modern day example of the
Mm,
Brooke Sadler talking about, I went to Romana's studio and I just never wanted to leave. And I was there like bell to bell. Like you hear these
yeah.
stories back in
Yeah.
the day,
Yeah.
but you have like a modern day version of that story.
Right. And I see that you have like your apprentice mode on your site, like with your info and things. So I know like
Hmm.
there's those of us who really care about that.
Yes.
Um, so for me, I treat all of my clients even like they are future teachers. I'm like,
Good word.
I love
Yes.
the fact that you want to be
Never thought of it that
here.
way. Yeah.
I never know when the next whoever is coming through the door. And I just, I, that's what I miss the most. I could cry about the studio, like
Yes. Yeah.
you never know. And that's magic to me, the people and their capabilities and their potential. And so I think that
So good.
creates kind of a magnet.
Yes.
People scheduling more sessions, and then you're kind of going, you're doing this not just because it feels good, you're doing this because you love it, you know and it's cool to love it, like you
Yes.
should. And then there are so many trainings right now that you should just go take one. and
Yes.
and and then if you have questions, come back.
Yes.
We'll talk about it.
Hmm.
Have the Starbucks conversation. um for me, I'll say the harder part to that was business piece wise. I was subcontracting space,
Hmm.
and that meant equipment too, which was a really good gig for me here
Yes.
in Seattle. Um, but at the same time, it did mean I had to like get creative work around that. It would have been more personal here in Seattle if I chose that approach.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, that's what Sydney did that for me, and like I said, I'll just never be able to thank her. So
Absolutely. I want to just echo what you said a minute ago about treating each client like they're a future teacher.
yes.
Yeah. Like I'm just like
Ooh,
I
let's
was
put
gonna
that on a second. Let's just
let's just can we just camp out there for a moment? Because like that's the sort of thing, I mean, I want to write it down, but like it's almost like I just wrote that on my heart. Like I will
oh
definitely do that with everyone that I know just loves this as much as I do, who just keep coming back and they find life in this stuff.
yeah. I feel like
Yeah,
you already I think that I said that because I feel like you already do that.
absolutely. That's why it just like it's like bouncing inside of me because it totally resonates with everything I believe for my people.
And
Yeah.
when you meet a teacher like that, it. It's not you're not having a session. You're working. There's something
Yes.
else happening, So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just about our things or what's going on with our body, how to, manage that. And I know you do this too, but when you're working with people, you keep it big picture. It's like,
Hmm.
we're here to work with all of you. I
Yes.
think that was, I'll never, something as simple as footwork on the reformer for me was so profound
Hmm.
because, bone rhythms were working properly with my body and the things that come up. Being able to take a deep breath like you've not really been able to before. And then,
Wow. Yeah.
you do find yourself kind of going, I mean, sure, everybody has this. You can tune out when you're in fitness, movement
Yes.
mode, or you can tune in, and it's nice to do both. And
Hmm.
I found that as Pilates as a way to kind of work with my humanity. Like these they're things I wrestle with in my head, and I get to work them out when I'm moving.
Yes.
Um, so
That's beautiful. So
it's fun
true.
to work with clients like that too.
Right. So then when we get into the scoliosis, one of the lines that you mentioned was learning from assessments, not judgments.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that one. So I think posture is something that's so visible, and it's even a word that right now people are like, should we talk about that? Like, what is
Mhm.
posture? Um, but when I look at how I want to be seen, right? Because now I'm very aware with as my situation has become more complex over time. Um, I want to be seen a certain way, and some of that is not in my control. And
Okay.
so
Yes.
that's where I feel like the judgment piece is something we have to be so mindful about as people who move other people and meet with
Hmm.
people, because it can come out accidentally, right? Like you're
Yes.
just, oops, we said some things that accidentally sound judgmental about the way you're holding your body. But even as I say that, I'm like, I'm not holding my body there. Like there is actually something holding me, you know?
Yes.
And so in the assessments, there's different words we can use, things that are really, you know, open, that kind of, I guess, free up the person you're assessing,
Yes.
to not feel like right now we're just judging my posture, right?
Right. Or we're being curious at this moment as opposed to passing judgment or making an assumption.
Yes, and that's such a healing thing that I think Pilates instructors have so much power to do out, you know, in our role that's very unique in the movement and medical or therapeutic industry is that we're all about empowering people. So, you know, we can actually create that curiosity and
Yes.
invite curiosity as opposed to other, you know, types of practitioners who are going to look at more diagnosing, which is definitely in their scope of practice.
In the scope of practice, right? Yeah.
You know, so for us, it's really an amazing moment to be able to say, what if we thought about that shape differently? You know?
Yeah. And if you broaden that conversation, it just makes me so grateful for being in this wellness space and in Pilates specifically,
Yes.
because we're doing so much that's kind of like our Pilates world is representative of the larger world that we're a part of. So when we nail down working with that openness and working with accessibility and working with, you know, non-judgmental spaces and safe spaces, all those things, and then we can use that template. We're looking at, okay, well, this is what the fitness industry should be like. Well, this is what the corporate industry should be like. This is what the world should be like. Follow,
take it.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Take it. So I'm recognizing that with every conversation, how intentional people are getting with their corner of the world and hoping that that is contagious.
Yeah, it's perpetuating into all like these people who are hopefully taking it wherever they go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It would be so nice to see that overall, like that openness in different industries. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the scoliosis piece, staying in line with that judgment thing, I always think about clients who come and present with some sort of, you know, from birth, they couldn't do something or whatever the case is. And my mindset is always, well, what can you do?
Yes, I love that.
As opposed to what you can't do.
Yay.
Well, what does that look like for people working with scoliosis? How does that, how do you work with that?
Yes. Okay. Yep. So there are certain things definitely, and we'd have to assume some things for like pathology sake, right?
Yes.
And then as you see those things either proven, like, okay, for safety's sake, we avoided these things, we're mindful of them. Flexion and extension being two of those big things, and rotation also, to be honest. And so once we get through assessments, I use those to kind of prove to people like there are some things you can do or versions of this safely. And that may look like, you know, I'm sure, and you've probably done something similar, but like working with people in pain, trying different positions and getting them to sense their body without having symptoms come up is a big thing that I try to do because it's so freeing and calming. And so with people with scoliosis, it also is a process because there's a lot of things people have been told that they cannot do. And if you work with someone over, let's say you get 7 great sessions in with somebody and then they go on vacation, you know, or something. So they're coming back to you. But in those 7 sessions, you're going to see certain things come out that they didn't necessarily need to hold on to.
Yes.
And then you may see some justified. And so that's where you need to kind of be there to bolster them and say, there's no way around this. This is uncomfortable and sad, right? Like,
yes, right.
And you have the right to be uncomfortable and sad about it. You know, and I think one of the reasons I fell in love with Pilates was because we look at movement in different positions. And it's such an awesome way to teach movement, like to anybody. Like, let's look at, you know, we're going to not only assess you, but we're going to see you move in seated, standing, supine, prone, You
Yes.
know, we're going to look at your shoulder girdle. We're going to talk about the pelvis. We're going to think about how your legs are moving in the pelvis. And um, if one thing isn't working exactly how you want it to, trying to keep the focus towards, you know, here's what you can do,
Yes.
is I feel like I'm sort of, you know, going around here, but
No, yeah,
I think in knowing your repertoire, and knowing which movements are going to activate certain areas in your client's positioning, and trying to structure your sessions so that you can anticipate when that move might come up and possibly redirecting
yes.
is one way, and a diplomatic way of saying we're just going to leave that out. Like, we're going to work on the challenges in some other areas.
Hmm.
Um,
We're gonna find it somewhere else in the apparatus.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, vertical is always better for those of us with the um, unique shapes, and also seated.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, why is that?
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, like why is vertical or seated as opposed to prone or supine?
Yeah, so extension sort of activates, or requires a certain amount of body awareness and balance for the vertebra. There's some additional pathologies that a lot of people go undiagnosed with, which was my situation.
Yes.
Um, and to avoid making your session turn into a scenario where somebody walks out feeling less stable. So center of gravity is, and balance and righting reflexes in your nervous system are
Mhm.
a massive contributor to how someone feels with scoliosis. So upright is the best way to activate those things. So I'm not saying you have to do your whole session in that position by any means. If you want to, give it a try. It's interesting.
Yes.
But starting and ending, and definitely having like some reminders of standing, whether it's walking around between movements or
Okay.
I guess sort of cutting your session in half with some standing movements.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are some reasons. And the pathologies are probably the biggest one. Extension, inflection, kind of tap into some of those pathologies, or can actually like
Exactly.
accentuate some of those things. Yeah. Um, you were saying earlier, like, people, scoliosis presents so many different ways. There's athletic and functional, which feels like somebody walked in and experienced a miracle, because sometimes they'll walk out and you're like, well, that's better, you know,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
which is an amazing part of spring tension and um, just finding their balance. But then we have to, you know, also face the fact that with idiopathic scoliosis, we're dealing with the shape of the vertebra. So I think
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
a place where I would invite people to really dig and do a couple of extra research study kind of searches on,
Mhm.
you know, whatever resource. Google Scholar will help you pull up some free medical research, but
Yes.
I have some links on my website. But the shape of the vertebra becomes wedge, over development if someone presents with scoliosis, and then breathing and movement kind of, you know, exaggerate it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
in my body, to make that more clear, there are certain therapies like Schroth and SEAS, and Pilates too, that emphasize traction and
Yes.
elongation in the spine,
Hmm.
which we know is so important and helpful. But there are some of us who that's actually going to be contraindicated, because the more traction we get, the more
The
slippery the
less.
slope gets
Yes. Right. Right.
for the vertebrae. So, um, yeah, a lot of people know that, but a lot of people don't. So I just thought I'd
Yeah.
be sure and mention
Absolutely. Yeah. And well, I didn't know that. And
that.
so I'm not gonna pretend. I'm like, tell it to everybody out there that may not know this. You're, I'm holding on right now for dear life, or actually, this is way over me. But at
No,
the
it's
same
not.
time, it comes from that place of like once again being curious, understanding what people can do, and just understanding that and just exploring
Yeah.
that. But you know what's a contraindication, and well, you said what's
Mm,
justified, because naturally my tendency is okay, let's find the end range, let's see what you
mm,
can do. That's uncomfortable, okay, we could scale it back, and then make it more, this would be a novice perspective, make it more an education for them on their body so they know the difference between end of range, what's pain, what's discomfort, what's really painful, you know what I mean? So they have a vocabulary around their body.
Sure, I love that. I mean, wanting them to feel their body is exactly what we want. And and I think most of us would know, like, okay, if this is what I'm observing in a convexity, which would be the part of the spine where you see a protrusion, like, so it's coming towards you if you're standing behind them and you see the ribs. So that's a word. I love to use the word convexity, concavity, protrusion, lateral bending, rotation, because what I don't like is when people, and I'd love actually to hear your thoughts on this, because your body is your mind, your body, your spirit, your person, that you're being. When we name things, so there are people who will give like pet, this sounds funny, but pet names to like a part of the body that maybe looks different than they would prefer it to look.
Yes.
And that could represented in a lot of different things, you know. I'm not for that. I'm like, because here's the thing, you are not this condition. You are not the disease, you know. So I try to keep those separate. So one of the things I try to do is say, and here's the other thing, you can very clearly avoid the emotional pitfalls of accidentally offending someone by just simply using those words. So protrusion, convexity, that would be the part of the spine that you see bending or is more round, like a topographical map kind of. So in the testing realm we were talking about, I would hope we would all just think, you know, okay, that part of the spine is already coming towards me. I don't want it to come further towards me, so we don't round into that. Things like that.
That makes sense. And in counseling they call it just simple labeling, right? Like you put a label on everything. You know, and this is, you know, they have a pet name for something, and then it becomes personified, or they identify with that. So yeah, there's a language piece to it that
That's interesting.
And I was speaking with on a podcast with a friend of mine yesterday, and we're talking about the words empowerment and liberation.
Cool.
And just in this context, like, we want to empower people, but sometimes it's just to liberate people. It's it's not about just giving them all this power to do big, strong stuff. It's just to free them from, you know, like you said, like maybe they've lived with this for a long time, and they've had a lot of, you know, bad recommendations from doctors, and then they come to you for the first time and they realize that their range of motion is greater than they thought, or that they can do something. And then there's a liberation in that. There's a freedom that comes from that movement. And like you said, you know, some of it is justified. It's like, nope, that actually is as far as you can go. You know, but then there is other things where there is that freedom, right? So
you're hitting all I'm like so excited. So I definitely, the liberation piece, I want my clients to learn. So there's a both and with props for me. I love props. I'm all about, you know, adding to proprioception, keeping people safe. But in working with teenagers, actually, one of the things is post wearing their brace, they're not sure what to do. And they're so young, people have been telling them what to do. And my favorite thing is working with, you know, young women, teenage women, and saying, we're not going to use a pad to teach you how to sit with your pelvis straight. You're going to learn to sit with your pelvis straight. You have the muscular power. And then they'll tell me things, you know, who advised them. And so I'm like, you know, okay, that's fine. You can do that when you're tired, but when you're not tired, I want you to be working. I want you to hold yourself, because you can, you know, the brace held your body for this many years, for over 20 hours in some of these girls' cases, you know, and we've got to prep your body for movement. And the first thing is standing and sitting. So we're going to do that. And I'm sorry someone told you to use this tool. I'm not telling you not to, but at the same time, when you're working with me, we're going to learn how to do that without it. And that moment where they have the muscle engagement and I'm going, can you feel both sides of your pelvis? And they're like, yeah, you know. I'm like, yes, we're going to keep that going, right? So what
Right.
do we put on top of that? Your rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the liberation from feeling like the scoliosis tells me what to do. Um,
Yes.
or people who think they know more. You know, there's also times where I'll be in session with people and I'm like, I'm not here to tell you how to move. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
have suggestions. These are the
Yes.
things I want you to learn. But I want you to have the autonomy. Come in, start the session, or get on screen, um, and just, start moving. Tell me what we're up to. How you doing?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, not letting it be like, well, what's the scoliosis teacher have to say?
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or let's see what the scoliosis is going to tell us what we can do today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And that's also a tough one because it's a both and. It depends where you are in your spectrum, right? As
Right.
far as pain. And but yeah, there are times where it surprised me. Um, pain is in my life, right? And looking at that and saying, I'm going to move the way that I know I can, and I know that it's going to help me face the pain. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, again, like knowing your body, that's that buildup, right? Like you've had to
Yes.
have the practice prior to that to feel like I know I can go here, and by the
Mm-hmm.
time I'm done, I'm going to feel better. So
That's so inspiring because I feel like you are infusing courage in people by doing
thanks.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, honestly,
And in
because
myself too, because I'm not immune, right? Like,
right, right,
yeah.
right. But that courage to say, okay, no, let's figure out what that looks like today, as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm gonna live with pain anyway, so I may as well just.
Chill out. Yeah, no. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The
Yep.
one of the things I was going to say earlier when you were talking about different movements, uh,
Hmm.
we've talked about with different people about helping them to understand what you're supposed to feel in an exercise as opposed to what an exercise is supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you speak to that just in terms of your work and how that ties in?
Um, so if I'm understanding, so basically, how do I approach encouraging feeling in an exercise?
Yes.
Okay. And because I've also heard people kind of, I wasn't sure which end of that question you were asking. So,
Mhm.
okay. Yes, encouraging the feeling part of it. I don't want to over question the client, right? In
Okay.
order to get them to feel, that's one thing. And a good example of that actually is, well, I'll save that one for later. So, having them feel for me, it has to be about positivity. So, it does need to be something that they feel that's positive. So, I'm not asking them too many times, unless it's a person that's at high risk, like, are you in pain?
Yes.
And then I try to put them, if the reformer is the best example because it's a flat surface, um, trying to so I use the smart spine wedges a lot,
Okay.
and they're warm. So that immediately adds to their proprioception. So they're feeling their body
Hmm.
um, in a way that they haven't been able to. A lot of people, there's disassociation in the concavities
Yes.
sometimes. And so asking them questions like and having a tool, so whether it's a prop or heat, that's my quickest suggestion for just immediately being able to say, oh, there's this part
There.
of my body that I
Yes.
don't normally feel. And it's a positive sensation versus, which is something that happens a lot. People will say, well, my back doesn't touch the floor there. And I'm sorry, I had to change my tone because that's what they sound like. It's
Yes.
very like they are just, not being nice to themselves. And I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
hey, your body is like a warrior. Look at where you've arrived. Like you're here. You're
Yes.
trying. So I do what I can to coach out of that mindset and then
Yes.
bring them to the positivity. Look, you do feel the heat. Look,
Mhm.
you are more balanced with these props. And eventually we're going to take them out. Your body's going to learn to, feel that surface and create muscle memory around that. So
Yes.
let's just go with the flow and find it. Also their breath. So internal awareness, that feeling of like, okay, my ribs are definitely expanding more there than they used to.
Yes.
Whether that's somebody with scoliosis or without. So having them breathe and sense the breath is huge for being able to get them into an exercise and feeling while they're moving.
Yes.
And then I just love springs, like the chair, so wonderful. And absorbing spring tension is something to me that is like a natural, I'm going to say it like, people with scoliosis are actually, there's an advancement in their bodies of some kind. Like,
interesting. Yeah.
I believe that the tension in the fascia has had to become smarter in some ways. I think we always talk about matted fascia and tight fascia and, oh no, my fascia, right? And it's like, there's actually some tension learning happening in our bodies that if you tap into it, you will see some amazing things as far as seeing people move better and feel better.
Yes.
So the springs help, I believe, talk to that tension. They learn how to support themselves from the inside like a spring. And you would tell that to anyone, right?
You tell them, exactly.
Yeah.
So. But there's such a grace that you have to bring to the conversation with people that already feel down on themselves, that they've kind of accepted defeat.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So,
and sometimes that represents, right, differently than you'd expect.
Okay.
Because you see, like, and I'm sure for you too, like you meet people and you think, you're self-conscious? No way. Like there's no way. There's no way you're self-conscious. You're thinking you have so much going for you. You're not
so much going for you. Right.
The list goes on. So it'd be surprising. Sometimes it's surprising with people. You just never know.
Yeah. I've been like eyes up this whole conversation, and there's so many things I've been meaning to get to. I'm like so enamored with like everything. I'm like hanging off your every word right now.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, it's been so great to connect with you.
Yeah, but so one of the things you were saying earlier is just about being humble, like in our kind of text conversations. Being humble learners, right?
Yeah.
Then and then as someone put in the comment section here earlier, just like how you are a brilliant researcher. You're amazing. So Missoni said that. So that's
Missoni. I don't know where I'd be without Missoni, so thanks Missoni. Okay, so the humble learner moment, I'm going to admit, so I borrowed that concept. My husband worked in a startup a couple of years ago, that was one of their like company principles, be the humble expert. So while they're saying, we have this very high expectation of you, please do not drop the ball, right?
Yes.
Please don't let all our systems go down, engineers. But they also...
And in the same breath, be humble.
In the same breath, please be nice to your coworkers.
Yes.
Listen to their suggestions. The amount of collaboration between engineers blows my mind. I feel like I wish I could be a fly on the wall a lot with his meetings, but they're so open too, like to each other's ideas. There's no, it just blows me away. It definitely is like, I don't know. I hope to be working that collaboratively with people at some point, but the
that
humble,
sounds like a respect thing.
Oh yeah.
Like a professional respect.
It's amazing. It's like, also, one of the things, so this ties to the humble learner, is that they're allowed to break stuff. Like that's part of what they do. So, the things break and then they put it back together, right? And so the pressure on us is we don't want to break anything.
Yes.
There's no trial and error here, people. Study, do your apprenticeship.
There's a total word that comes off of that. I'll finish your thought because that just triggers something for me. But
I think I kind of fit. I've wrapped it up. Go ahead. The humble learner thing, we got it.
Yeah. Okay. So psychological safety.
Yes.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Can I come have a session with you?
Oh yes, online at 12. How's that?
Okay, great.
psychological safety, right? And then you're saying you're allowed to break stuff. Do we create an environment where we can fail and still be safe, where we can still learn and still have a sense of, okay, I learned something from this. I can now continue to move forward. That wasn't a setback. I'm still moving forward. So that psychological safety is a parallel to being allowed to break stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's what we do. We need to create that safe place for people who are learning to break stuff. Not people, but like make
Right.
mistakes and make their pivots.
Right. And I'm one place I think of that is form, if I can use that word.
Yes.
You know, like as you're executing the Pilates exercises, do they look like the pictures, you know? And most of the time, answer is no. Is it still great for your body? Yes. You know, and your form will change over time. And I think that's something actually just off the top of my head, I'm like, yeah, the yoga community does a good job of that. Like they show people improving, if that's what we want to call it, you know, reaching a greater range that's healthy for them.
Yes.
And I think we can do it a little bit more messy in the Pilates world.
I think so. Yeah. Read authentic.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, at the same time, I'm like, yes, and I'm like, I do love being able to and craft almost the person, like so you're sculpting as you're going through the movement.
Yes.
So I'm sure someone, like I know critiques I've gotten when I've videoed my teaching, people are like, are you going to stop talking? You know?
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, yeah.
Right. But there's something, I've been experimenting with a few exercises or different ways of teaching just this week to set up an exercise. So
Cool.
at the same time, we want to, you know, let people move and find their shape and all these different things. The way I've been playing with it this week, and I use it with a lady that I'm working with, almost an apprentice format, is we're going to do our kneeling sidekick series.
Okay.
But we're going to do 15 exercises just to set up this one exercise. And then we'll do some like, you know, seal or rolling or stuff just to say sorry to your body afterwards.
I love that. I'm apologizing.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're chasing after, I don't want to say it this way, but in a sense, chasing after perfection in this exercise by doing all the exercises that set that exercise up, giving them every exercise and movement prep so that their kneeling sidekick series today, just choose any exercise, would be a little bit crisper than it was for them last time. Like
that. Yeah, that's great.
Right?
Yeah.
So that model of perfection isn't like, okay, well, look it on the wall or look at Joe do it. We're going to make it look like that. We're going to do it like, I know what it looks like when you normally do it. So we're going to spend all day to make that look a little bit freer in your hip or more extension in your arm or legs a little higher or whatever the case is. So choose one exercise, take like as many exercises as necessary to set that exercise up to do that one exercise crisp and then you know, climax and then come back down, right? So
I love doing that actually. So that's how I like thinking of, I'm sure we all think of this. When you have the assessment with someone with scoliosis, you realize where the challenges are. You realize, and I would maybe emphasize this point, traditionally in therapy, therapeutic movement and things like that, we're leaning towards mobility, right?
Okay.
And for a lot of folks with scoliosis, the emphasis needs to be actually stability, which is actually a really unique thing that Pilates offers people because of the spring tension. Having them practice balancing that, you know, starting with the lightest and moving towards heavy, you know, when they realize just managing in a seated position, even if you're, you know, propped on the box or your legs are apart on the tower facing the push through bar, you know, managing different spring variations and being able to keep your spine upright as you pull that bar down, getting better alignment through their shoulder girdle, that is an accomplishment.
Absolutely.
And doing, as you're saying, like with your sessions and playing with the exercises, like prepping almost, you know, doing all the movements based on, we're going to make sure that that happens to your very best level before you go.
Right. And but what
Envisioning. Oh, go ahead.
no, sorry, I was just thinking what you're saying. That's where the education comes in because traditionally, and anyone who's done kind of physiotherapists have been around that would you understand it's like mobility before stability. That's kind of like
Right.
that's the
Right.
adage, right? But now you're saying no, let's look at stability first because
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z, right?
Right. Yeah. It is they're calling it now, it's a stability disease. Like,
Mm,
I would say over my, like, so I was diagnosed at like 15 and I'm 33 now. So the range of what my body's been through is just bizarre.
yeah.
um, so I kind of am like, yeah, I'm definitely on that train now. Like, I think I wasn't as much on the stability train, especially the beginning of my teaching. So it was like 2013.
Yeah.
I kind of thought, well, yeah, both, mobility and stability. And now I'm like, you know, they'll get to the mobility. The stability is huge because it's
Yeah.
what happens
That's
too
interesting.
that's unique about Pilates is um, the front line of the body, back of the line connection
Yes.
is something that I don't know that other people teach well. I'm just gonna go ahead and toot Pilates on that. Like, I
Yes.
just, I think, and so the importance of being able to know how to use your muscles that imply verticality to the body, um, that becomes so amazing because I had to actually teach myself to walk again at a certain point, more than once,
Wow. Yeah.
because joints just don't function the way that they should. And
Yes.
knowing that, I know my body is literally the only thing like that got me through that.
Hmm.
So knowing that, I'm treating my clients like they're going to be teachers because they will at some point. They're going to have to teach themselves
Yes.
to get back up, to not let whatever, life incident, because it's rarely, I would say, sure, accidents happen. Trainers accidentally injure people. PTs injure people. But what happens is the little life moment. It'll be reaching up to put the dishes in the cabinet,
Right.
or
Yeah.
moving, or like moving, like packing a box, putting it, getting
Right.
it out of your truck, putting it somewhere. Yeah, so it'll be those moments that they need to be ready for. And so that's where I'm like, yeah, structure your session so that there's things they can memorize and tune into. They're like, great, my whole body is a little bit thrashed right now from whatever accident,
Yes.
but I know
But.
I can breathe this way. I know I can
Hmm.
find my TA.
Hmm.
That means I don't have this kind of injury. I can feel my spine, so I know, I'm not experiencing anything severe. And when I'm scared to death, that means I'm going to get my butt up, you know?
Yes.
And so I think, yeah, memorizing those things, structuring so you can teach them how to do that. Super important.
Wow. You have wisdom well beyond your years.
That's so funny. Thank you for saying that. But
Wow.
I'm
Yeah.
just trying my best, like everybody.
Of course. Yeah. No, you're pretty good. But we're at 56 minutes. Like that was such a rich hour, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been,
Oh,
I mean, your energy, I mean, like, I, I'm so happy we connected. I'll just say that. Thanks for taking the time.
yes. So there's like most intuitive, present, and gifted person that you are. You're
She's so
loved.
sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's a
Amazing.
great friend.
Yes, awesome. Well, I'll send you the replay later. Thank you so much for your time. That was so educational for me, if no one else in the room.
Uh,
That's
it,
awesome.
Thank you. I mean, really, for me, it's like I'm misconnecting with people right now. So I really appreciate this. Thanks.
All right.